Please comment where you are watching in the world. I'm a young, 20s, gay man with a high sex drive. As such, I frequent Grindr, Scruff, etc. looking for opportunities to have sex. I have a thing for older men too. I don't really care how old as long as they don't look like my grandpa. I live in a big city, but even so, Grindr and Scruff can be pretty dry some days. A lot of the guys I'm into aren't attracted to me cause I'm a lot younger. I'm also not white or muscly, so I don't get an abundance of attention on those apps in general. On those dry days, the wise thing to do would be to nut quietly by myself and go to sleep peacefully. But like any other 20-something man, sometimes my second head takes over and decides that sex tonight is a life necessity. I don't always meet someone in public first, but I'm pretty good at hooking up safe. I have a checklist of things that I will send one of my best friends every time I'm meeting someone. Screenshot of the online profile, all face pictures they gave me, a first name, their phone number if I have it, social media profiles if I have them, where we're meeting. I'll text them regular updates when I'm on the way over, when I've made it over, and whether or not the guy is the guy in the pictures. If we ever move locations, I text them an exact address /app/room number immediately, or turn my location sharing on. Once it looks like the dirty is about to start, I'll let them know a time by which I'll text that I'm safe. And my friends are pretty awesome, so they look out for me. One thing to note, if a guy offers me a drink while I'm with them, I make sure it's in a sealed can or bottle, or they let me watch while they pour. Most people are actually very conscious and deliberate about this nowadays. It's nice. A couple months ago, I figured I'd start proactively casting a wider net for those nights that the apps are dry. I joined this site online specifically catered to the gay older/younger crowd, very early internet days/retro in terms of UI. Eventually I get a message from this guy. He sends me a kind of low residential picture of him in oversized glasses and a sweater/button-down combo. I read his profile and he's 71, enough for me to think that's old. And I can't quite tell if I'm attracted to him from the first photo. I message back asking for a second, and good sign. He sends one over without fuss. Again, a bit low residential but without the glasses, and I think yeah, okay, maybe. His profile says something about how he's from the UK, and he's quite tall, so I figure British accent tall daddy? It'll be novel at least. Reading further on, he prattles on about how he likes meeting people who are strong-willed and breaking them down to be completely submissive to him. Sounds hot. We exchange phone numbers and text on WhatsApp a bit. He seems a bit arrogant. He starts telling me people often say he looks like a movie star. He looks way better in real life. Apparently he chooses poor pictures intentionally, so people get pleasantly surprised when they meet. And is telling me how he can tell that I'm smart by the way I text or something. Heard it all before, but I have a bit of a high tolerance for this brand of old man bullshit posturing at this point. He lets me know a date he'll be coming in and staying in a hotel downtown a month later. I figure I'll probably forget about him by then and never message him again. And then a month later rolls by, and it's another particularly dry night on the apps. I'm having a need sex now night, and I remember that guy I was talking to from that site. I hit him up on WhatsApp. Sure enough, he's in town and tells me where he's staying. I tell him I'll be there in an hour. You disease free? He takes a while to respond. Eventually he says he is squeaky clean. We'll talk about it when you get here. I'm like, okay, sounds good. Text one of my friends the usual. I'm a little more nervous for this one, just cause he seems a little odd, and I kind of trust the apps a bit more weirdly. It's much easier to tell if someone is a legit person when they live in the same area as you. I figure it's a hotel. You can't be planning anything too awful for me. I show up to the hotel where he's standing in the lobby, and lo and behold, he looks exactly like his pictures, just much less happy and a bit more droopy. His shoulders hunch almost halfway up his neck. His torso is bent back at the waist a bit too much. He almost looks like he's imitating a confident cartoon character. But he is quite tall. He has a foot on me. I say hi. 2 words to describe the way he came across, preoccupied and calculating. His eyes seemed to shift everywhere constantly, and when they landed on mine, they were freakishly piercing. I don't remember if he said hi back, but the first thing he starts talking about is how that family over to the right is hiding some great unhappiness and will never be happy with themselves. I ask, why do you say that? He says it's because they are giving so much attention to the kid and aren't talking to each other. I look over. Looks like a regular sister, little brother, and mom tired from the day of vacationing, waiting for their dad to finish up sorting something out at reception. By the way, he has a very strong American accent. Bummer. We walk to the elevators. The second thing he says to me is that I breathe from my lungs when I sleep and don't let my breath drop into my belly. I have some classical training as a performer, so I have a decent understanding of basic functions like that. Decent enough to try to forward the conversation with the absent-minded reply, "No, I breathe low." Eyes lock on mine. A brief pause. Only a subtle change in tone. You want to know how I know that? I look at the way your lower jaw rests now. It kind of has this unsightly protrusion from the bottom of the skull where it should be resting. That probably happens overnight when you start breathing from your chest, which makes that fat tongue of yours press up against your bottom teeth and deforms it. No. I'm pretty sure I breathe low when I sleep. Okay, no need to get defensive. I'm happy to be proven wrong. I've never experienced this level of agitation from anyone within the first 2 minutes of meeting them. I have been in emotionally manipulative relationships before, so the feeling was familiar, and weirdly intense for a first meeting. My brain kind of goes on autopilot polite hookup mode, and I figure maybe it'll be okay once we stop talking. He continues posturing as we ride up the elevator. He loves psychology and predicting how humans act apparently. We get off on his floor and approach his room. I quickly fire off the suite number plus, he's a little odd, in a text to my friend. As he taps his keycard, he glances at me over his shoulder. "You don't need to text someone my room number, you know." "Okay, well I just did. I'm a very trustworthy person. You have to trust me." "Okay, I just do that with everyone I meet." The room is fairly normal, nothing too weird. His stuff is piled in a corner a bit haphazardly. Bed is made, lights are all on, normal hotel room. I see an open wine bottle on the desk. A glass of Coke and a glass of white wine are pre-poured. I take off my jacket and sit on the edge of the bed. He sits on the desk chair. Starts quizzing me. "Do you do this a lot? You asked if I was disease-free. What are you expecting to happen here? Because I am a squeaky clean guy, I don't have sex with people unless I am in a relationship with them. The reason I ask is people who do this a lot tend to be quite dirty and slutty, and eventually it catches up to them. Listen, I can tell you're a smart guy. I can tell you're a strong-willed person. What I really like is when a strong-willed person like you becomes completely submissive to me. I like breaking them." At this point I realize he's not going to stop talking, and feel like it might be a good idea to leave before having my pants down around him. But I feel frozen, on the verge of tears even. He is making me feel small, like a child. I see him smile a little. He likes it. I am sufficiently creeped out. "Look, I don't really think we're a match here, so I'm gonna go." "Okay, you're feeling unsafe." "No, I'm not. I just don't think we're on the same page. Let me know what I can do to make you feel safe. How about you have a drink?" "No thanks." "Diet Coke or wine?" I look at the pre-poured drinks on the desk. I get a gut feeling that I should not drink them. I stand up. "No, I'm really fine, thank you." I quickly get my jacket on and jump into a polite, "Nice to meet you, take care, bye." On my way out the door, he give me wrong directions to get down to the subway from the hotel. Tells me smart people take that route, stupid people take the long way. I say thanks and leave. I text my friend, "Holy fuck, I'm safe." And I take my normal-ass subway route home. Thank you very much. I pledge to stop letting my dick think for me. Young Harrison Ford, let's not meet again. I wanted to clarify that this has not been my normal experience at all on dating apps. I've met up with at least 100 partners by this point, and this was the worst experience by far. This isn't representative of what it's like if you use dating apps carefully and use your head. That being said, I've been dealing with mental health stuff and have grown a lot as a person since this experience. I feel like I am a lot more confident now, and I would never get this deep into this kind of situation again. Young gays/trans/MBS. Stay safe, y'all. Know your worth. Do not settle for bad dick. You are your own validation, not another person, no matter how horny you are. And yes, I really mean no matter how horny you are. Up until junior year of high school, I flew mostly under the social radar and stuck to my status as a nerd girl. But when I was 15, I joined varsity cheer. My school's cheerleaders weren't popular by definition, but everyone kind of knew who we were because we were on the announcements, performed at pep rallies, and generally engaged with the students a lot. I made a lot of friends that year, and some of them happened to be the cool kids. For a while, I thought this was my long-awaited karma payoff for the years of bullying I'd suffered at their hands. I even developed a crush on one of them, a crush which the junior cheer captain herself volunteered to help me pursue. Homecoming is a big deal where I'm from, and I began to fantasize about my crush asking me to go with him. I'd heard rumors he was planning a dramatic proposal, and as homecoming season approached, I became more and more sure I would be his date. The junior cheer captain, who was close with him, kept dropping hints that I was right. One day at practice, she asked me what my favorite candy was, and I knew it would be so my crush would know what to give me. You can imagine my surprise when, after an exhausting theater rehearsal, I walked into the parking lot and was confronted by a guy I'd hardly spoken to asking me to be his date. My theater friends all applauded, assuming I was overjoyed. I saw both my parents in the parking lot recording the whole surprise. But most importantly, the cool kids I'd recently befriended were standing right there behind him, egging him on. I didn't understand why, because he wasn't popular at all. In fact, he was known to be kind of creepy. The junior cheer captain was laughing, encouraging him to give me the box of my favorite candy he was holding. She'd definitely orchestrated the whole thing. I didn't really know the guy, but I didn't want to humiliate him in front of the coolest kids in school, so I faked a smile and rolled with it. I promised myself I'd deny him later, in private, so he wouldn't be embarrassed. Afterwards, when my parents excitedly asked me how I felt about the ordeal, I explained how uncomfortable it made me. I said that I got strong, creepy vibes from the guy. That didn't fly with my parents. My mother accused me of having expectations too high, and my father demanded to know, not for the first time, if I was secretly a lesbian. I had never had a boyfriend or shown much interest in dating. To make his case stronger, I'd just become best friends with the only openly gay girl our school had ever seen. Long story short, I knew that if I shut down my date, I'd effectively declare war on my parents. However, I played my dad's protective instinct against him and persuaded him to let me friend-zone my date. After all, he knows how high school boys think, right? I texted my date that night and explained that I only saw us as friends, but would still be happy to go to homecoming with him. He was very polite about it, although I could tell he was interested in me romantically. It seemed we'd reached a deal until the next day at school, when one of my cheerleader friends referred to my date as my boyfriend. I corrected her and told her we're just going to homecoming as friends. She seemed confused and told me my date was telling anyone who could listen that I was his girlfriend. A few more of my friends approached me with similar comments, and I confronted my date about them. He denied all involvement and suggested it was just a rumor. I reminded him that we were just friends, and I had zero romantic interest in him. He said he understood. I got a call from the junior cheer captain. She pretended to be sweet and conspiratorial, but I was still annoyed that she'd led me to believe my crush would ask me to homecoming. She began her attempt to persuade me that I was wrong to friend-zone my date. She said that she'd spent many afternoons planning his proposal with him, and she knew he was kind of creepy from afar, but he was sweet and caring underneath all that. I said, if he was such a catch, she should date him. Annoyed, she dropped the sweet act. She told me that I had to date him, because he liked me so much, and he'd gone to so much trouble to ask me to homecoming. I had to give him a chance, because he'd gone out on a limb for me. I told her she was wrong, and I didn't have to do anything I didn't want to do, and I owed him nothing. I ended up hanging up on her soon after that, but that was just the beginning. Starting the next Monday, he would corner me in the hallway and give me a rose he held in his teeth. He usually did so between my 6th and 7th periods, when my path through the hall crossed his. I was deeply uncomfortable with this and told him so, but he wouldn't stop. I took different routes to escape him, but the junior cheer captain and her posse made a point of tracking me down so he could find me elsewhere. Every time he did this, everyone in the area would treat it as a sweet romantic gesture, despite my obvious discomfort. Wouldn't any girl be lucky to have a boy so devoted to her that he gave her a rose every day? He was still telling everyone I was his girlfriend. The final straw for me was when he walked into a class he wasn't in to find me and give me my daily rose. My teacher, who was friends with the junior cheer captain, let this happen. For weeks afterwards, she would ask me about my date every day. When he came in, I told him to get out and leave me alone. His feelings were clearly hurt, and he left looking like a kicked puppy. My classmates started calling me a cold, hard bitch. It didn't matter what I had to say about him. I was an ice queen, refusing this sweet boy's advances. Everyone in the school had decided that I was in love with him, and nobody cared what I had to say about it. My crush, who was part of the popular group, joined the junior cheer captain in pressuring me into returning my date's feelings. At every event where the cheerleaders were present, my date would push his way to the front of the crowd. He would go to great lengths to get my attention. At football games, he would wave a flag in the student section, so I'd look at him when we were cheering. The other girls would make comments on how endearing he was when he waited in the parking lot by our bus back to the school, just to hug me and tell me how great I did. I didn't know what else to do other than let this happen. I had only recently ascended to a position of visibility. If I conflicted too hard with the cool kids, who were so dead set on setting me up with this guy, I could be an outsider all over again. I hoped that if I just kept ranting to my real friends about how creepy he was and publicly let him do what he wanted, it would all blow over. My school had a 15-second attention span, so some scandal had to one-up me sooner or later. The truth emerged, as usual, in the locker room. It turns out the junior cheer captain had been telling him, during their afternoons together, that I was into him. He'd come to her for help announcing his crush on me, and she'd gone a step further and convinced him I felt the same, despite the fact that I didn't even know his name. She'd lied to him for weeks prior to the homecoming proposal, and when I told her that was wrong, she didn't care. She told me I should be grateful, because everybody was starting to think that I was gay. My best friend, the lesbian who was starting a gay revolution, and I, inspired, spread a rumor that we were dating. After all, everybody already thought I was gay, right? But my date wasn't fazed. In fact, he told everyone that he'd just turned me straight again. EW. 3 weeks after he asked me, it was finally homecoming night. Thanks to cheer obligations and a complete coincidence involving a switched backpack that left me without my dress, I ended up only attending the dance for half an hour. My date awkwardly stood on the side of the room while I danced my heart out to Mr. Brightside. I almost felt bad for him when, right at the end, the junior cheer captain appeared like a summoned demon to suggest we slow dance at the next opportunity. Thank God I escaped that one by walking to the DJ and suggesting he play Footloose. My date walked me out to the parking lot to wait for my mom to pick me up. While we waited for her to drive around, which took entirely too long because she still hoped I'd stop making a fuss and date him, he asked me out. I politely declined. He quickly stammered that we could go with a group of people, like the junior cheer captain and my crush. I denied him again and made it clear we were only friends, and I wasn't interested in romantic endeavors because I was too busy. That was actually true. I was in all advanced classes, varsity theater and cheer, and worked part-time. A few days later, a teacher eloped to Vegas, and nobody cared about my love life anymore. My date and I were distanced again by classes and activities and work. It appeared that everything was going back to normal. That Friday at the football game, my crush asked me to sit on his shoulders for the alma mater, kind of a romantic thing at my school. Overjoyed, I accepted, and I hoped this was the beginning of a new chapter for me. I ignored the frantically waving flag in the stands. Monday, my date stood on a chair in his second period class and announced that everyone should be wary of my crush because he would steal your girl. I heard everyone buzzing about it a few hours later when someone called me a bitch, again, for breaking my date's heart. I knew I was being dramatic, but I decided not to go to lunch that day, terrified of running into him. I'm so glad I didn't. Later, I saw on Snapchat that my date had carved my name into his arm with a pair of scissors. His bleeding arm was screenshotted and sent to me by half a dozen people, most of them demanding why I'd hurt him like this. He did it in the middle of lunch in a crowded cafeteria, and somehow no administration noticed or cared. The school was buzzing. My date was a broken-hearted victim, and I was the evil, secretly gay bitch who wouldn't give him a chance. I got so many dirty looks. By fifth period, I was ready to just walk out, but my good girl instincts kicked in, and I decided to tough it out for 2 more hours. Around that time, I got a panicked text from one of my cheer friends. While she'd initially been insistent that I date the creepy guy, she'd apparently changed her mind after the lunch incident earlier. She told me that my date, who was in her 5th period class, was going off the rails. He had started out saying that he wanted to kill himself because I wouldn't love him. This had escalated to saying he'd kill my crush for lying to me and stealing me away. Finally, he'd started talking about how he knew where I lived. My parents had given him my address when he initially wanted to ask me to the dance at my house, and he would make me pay for wronging him. I knew that, after 6th period, our paths through the hall would cross. Since the beginning of this ordeal, the school had cracked down on students getting outside, and my alternate route to escape him was no longer an option. My class was at the far end of the hall with nowhere to go but into the central hub, and he would be coming from the other end of the hallway towards mine. I was stuck up a chimney, basically. Desperate, I texted the junior cheer captain to finish what she started and tell him that I was not and had never been interested in him. She'd made this mess, and I would make sure she had to clean it up. She said she'd go to the counselor, but she didn't know what else to do. This was way beyond her control now. For the first and only time, I skipped class. I hid out in the theater hall and waited for 7th period. I got a few texts during the passing period that my date was waiting for me by the bathrooms. There was a little alcove right there where you can't see people coming around the corner, and the thought of him hiding there and waiting for me to walk by alone horrified me. Right before 7th period began, a few of my classmates burst in, cackling, and proclaimed that my date was coming down here after school to kill my crush. They thought this was hilarious, but judging by the look on my crush's face, this wasn't a joke to him anymore. Our teacher brushed this off as typical theater drama, pun fully intended. I watched the clock and tried not to cry, knowing that by the time the bell rang my date would be outside, waiting for me and my crush to emerge. That day ended up being a work day, so my crush and I were able to escape the classroom and hide out elsewhere in the theater hall to get away from him. He opted for the black box theater, and I went for the lighting closet. Obviously, I didn't witness what happened, but my best friend filled me in afterwards. Allegedly, my date had turned up 3 minutes before the bell rang and stood outside the classroom where we couldn't see him when we opened the door. He told everyone standing around that he was ready to have a knife fight with my crush. We don't know if he actually had a knife or not, but the idea that he might was enough to terrify me. His arm was wrapped in paper towels that he was bleeding through. My best friend told him my crush and I were gone, but he didn't believe her. He stood outside for 25 minutes, until the administrators began walking through to make sure no one was in the school who shouldn't be. My date wasn't in theater, so he wasn't allowed to stick around. That night, I texted him that not only would I never date him, but could no longer even see a friendship between us. I sent him a number to a suicide hotline and told him to get help. Finally, I told him that he needed to learn what no meant, and I never wanted to speak to him again. He responded that he was sorry and asked if there was anything he could do to fix this. I told him no. I don't think he learned the meaning of the word after all, because the same pattern repeated itself a few months later on Valentine's Day, the next year at homecoming, senior year Valentine's Day, and prom. But those are other stories. I've since graduated and gone off to college hundreds of miles away from him. My family back home moved from the address my parents gave him. Contrary to popular belief, I'm not gay. My crush, on the other hand, came out a few months later, and we were friends for the rest of high school. I'm working on handling romantic endeavors in a healthy way, but he got in my head. He was the first person to ever show interest in me. Ironically, the last time I saw him was my first, and only, homecoming game after graduating, but this time I had true friends to defend me when he predictably tried to pull some weird stuff with me. The worst part, looking back, was somehow being at fault for everything. To this day, people from my high school reference the whole ordeal as, "That time you wouldn't date that poor shy kid." I can't even appreciate red roses anymore. I hadn't met him, but my friend worked with him. So he set us up. I was hesitant because I had gotten out of a bad relationship which culminated in an ugly breakup a few months prior, and I really wasn't looking to date. But I'd also kind of isolated myself and ultimately figured meeting someone new and having a night out couldn't hurt. Famous. Last. Fucking. Words. So it's about a week before the date, and Ben calls me. Asks a few basic questions, seems pretty normal but a little awkward, which I guess is to be expected because he knows next to nothing about me. Asks about my favorite color and where I'd like to go to eat and just normal shit like that. I tell him royal blue. Why? He says he was just wondering. Okay. I figured maybe he was going to bring a small, "Good to meet you, I hope this goes well, I'm trying to be friendly" sort of gift. Motherfucker shows up for our date with 24 white roses airbrushed royal blue. One rose would have been a sweet gesture. This is a bit much. He also informs me I'll be driving because his dad dropped him off. Of interest here, I'm 24 and he's 26. Says he doesn't want to learn to drive because he's scared of it. I ask if he was ever in an accident, maybe when he was younger, and nope. Just scared of the idea of driving. We live in a small city. From my house to the restaurant is a couple miles. All in town. In a small city. He critiques my driving the whole way. Why you drive closer to the left than my dad? You're half in the other lane. Be careful. I was nowhere near the other lane. I have never, to this day, and I am now middle-aged, been involved in an accident when I was driving. I'm a very good driver. We get to the restaurant. It's a regular Chinese buffet. One of the dishes is sweet and sour meatballs. The server comes over and asks how our meal is. Ben laughs, and when he does he sounds like a station wagon full of asthmatic seals, and says if I wanted meatballs I'd have gone to the Italian place across the street. Fuck me. What have I done? He then starts peppering me with questions, all beginning with if we start dating. If we start dating, how do you feel about spontaneity? If we start dating, how important is sex? He then tells me he's a virgin but is bisexual, although he has no interest in male genitals and has a tickle fetish. How important is sex with you, dude? Not at all. I'd actually rather die. Do you like massages? How many sexual relationships have you had? I'm allergic to cats. Would you consider rehoming him? My family is all out of state. Would you consider moving? I'm dying here. He then starts talking about his family, and then crying about his grandmother, who died when he was 8. And not just, wow, this came up, forgive me, I'm a little misty-eyed. He's sobbing. Somehow I survived dinner. We get back to my place. This is like 2002, before everyone had cell phones in their pockets. He has to come in and call his dad. I offer to just drop him off, but he says his dad is at his grandpa's and he, Ben, doesn't have a house key, that his dad prefers to drive him. I say fine, but keep your hands to yourself, don't touch anything, and once you get a hold of your dad, wait outside. On the drive back to my place, he tells me, I always told myself that I would wait a minimum of 1 year before considering sex with my girlfriend, but if we start dating I may drop it to 6 months because we're both older. How would you feel about that? And if you ever stay over, know I have a picture of my GMA on my dresser. I won't take it down, but I will turn it around when we have sex, like I always do when I masturbate. So you don't have to worry about that. I have to be on camera. This has to be a joke. We get to my place, he comes in, calls his dad, and while he's on the phone my cat comes in the room. I pick him up, kiss him on top of the head, and say I'll feed him in a minute. Ben says, have any men ever been intimidated by your relationship with your cat? Because that just made me really uncomfortable. I mean, you kissed him and talked to him. I told him to esteed few and get out. He tried to apologize, but I was just done. Practically pushed him out the door. The moron even left me a couple VMs that week wanting to go out again. Then his last VM was basically wanting an exit interview. If you won't go out, will you at least tell me what put you off? Because I really liked you, and I don't know what you think went wrong. I've spent the last 20 years convinced I was being pranked. The friend who set us up never spoke to me again. Edit. After thinking about him again, after all these years, I just looked him up on FB. He has a unique last name, so I'm positive it's him, as well as his profile listing the city we lived in. So yeah, no doubt. He lives with his sister and has a job as a candy stock boy with Walgreens. He's in his 40s. He also has a picture of his room which has a bed that's like a bunk bed, but there's no bottom bunk. It's so cool. That's called a loft bed. You have a loft bed, dude. Back in college, I met this girl and asked her if I could take her out to dinner. She said yes. I was ecstatic. Well, then I had to figure out where to take her to give her an idea of who I am and what I'm about. So I tried to do something that was thoughtful. I've learned that there are 2 types of gifts, expensive and thoughtful. If you can't do expensive, which I couldn't, then you'd better go hard on the thoughtful. This was taking place in the US South, but she was a freshman from Pennsylvania. I started thinking about things that be new and interesting to her. The answer came to me in a flash. Bojangles. I would take her to Bojangles. It's cheap, it used to have fairly decent food, but most of all it's southern, and we'd be able to discuss regional differences in food and culture. Of course, it's also fast food. Really crappy fast food. The evening of the date arrived. I drove her to the place and talked all about fried chicken and the South and tea, and how it must be different from the North. We got there and ordered at the register, then moved down to pick up our tray of food. Fancy, huh? We waited and waited. I tried to make some small talk. You know, the small talk you make when something could interrupt your conversation at any moment. Then we waited some more and more. My dinner, fried chicken, was on the tray. The drinks were on the tray. Her sandwich was not. So we stood there with the silence growing more and more awkward. Minutes rolled by that felt like ages. Finally, an employee noticed us standing there and said, "Did you need something?" I said yes, that we needed her sandwich. The employee turned around and grabbed the sandwich from the place it had been sitting the whole time we'd been standing there and put it on the tray. It had been there since the beginning. Not a great start. I picked up the tray and started walking back to a table with her. But there was an issue. Bojangles used to have the best sweet tea, so I always got a large. The cups they use for the larges are the kind that are smaller at the bottom, so they'll fit in your cup holder in your car. That's great for a car, but not so great for balancing them on a tray. It fell over. Fortunately, it fell over onto the tray, but not before knocking her drink off of the tray onto the floor. She had gotten the smaller drink, which came in the wax paper cup instead of the plastic cup that the larges are in. That's important, because it means that when her cup hit the ground at about a 30-degree angle, the cup crushed and launched the liquid inside out like a cannon onto her foot, drenching her in Pepsi or Coke or some soft drink. Being gentlemanly, I went and got her a new drink, got back to the table and started trying to eat. I had ordered fried chicken, which I realized would mean that I had to eat with my fingers, which was stupid on a first date. Not wanting to look dumb, I decided I'd try to avoid eating with my fingers by using the plastic cutlery provided by the store, which would have been a fine idea if not for the fact that Bojangles only provides you with a spork. Not a fork, not a spoon, not a knife. A spork. A plastic spork, to be exact. I'm trying to pry the chicken off the bone with this plastic spork, and it's going nowhere. I can't get the chicken off the bone. I dug in a little deeper and really pulled, which bent the spork back a little, which served as a spring to launch my chicken breast across the table. I actually caught it before it could hit the floor. I remember thinking to myself, well, just enjoy this chicken because this date is going nowhere. I decided to just forget it and eat the dang chicken with my fingers. She was obviously not going to be going out with me anymore, so I decided not to worry about impressing her, just try to get out of the situation without looking any dumber than I already did. I reached down and pulled off a nice piece of chicken with my fingers, and I missed my mouth. Seriously, I jammed the chicken onto my face. I don't know how I missed it, but I did. I just missed, which of course smeared chicken grease all over my cheek. The girl was looking at me like she was waiting for me to tell her, "It's just a prank, bro." I felt so dumb. We finished eating in silence. Finally, I said, "Well, let me take you back to your dorm." I gathered up all the trash on the tray, walked over to the garbage can and accidentally threw the whole thing into the trash. All of it, cups, the spork, napkins, the tray. All of it. I looked at the girl, she looked at me, and we both ran to the car. I've had some other bad dating experiences, but this one took the cake. I also remember being shocked when the car started when we were leaving. After the night I'd had, I was fully expecting to have to walk the several miles back to campus in the dark. I know I'm not the only guy, or girl for that matter, who has resorted to online resources to get laid. In my book, there's nothing wrong with it, as long as both parties are looking for the same thing. I never lie about what I'm looking for. I'm always straightforward about looking for sex. Most of the girls I've met have been totally cool with it, and were looking for the exact same thing. There have been a few that claimed they were looking for just sex, when in reality, they were looking for a relationship. That didn't end well for any of us. That's why it's always a good idea to be totally honest with someone, including yourself. Her name was Heidi. I met her on a popular dating app. I was very clear in my bio about what I was looking for, and she seemed to be looking for the same thing. She was beautiful, and we sent a few pics back and forth, and did a couple video chats to make sure there was no catfishing or filters going on. It's never good when you meet in person, and they are nothing like their photos. She was just as gorgeous as she was in her pics, and she was into me too, so we set up a night to hang out. As a rule, I never put out on the first meet when it comes to dating or hookup apps. I want to make sure we're both into it, and no one is just going through with it out of obligation. That's just fucked up. Heidi said she was cool with that, and even respected it. We met last week at a local bar near us, and had a few drinks. She was amazing. Other than being drop-dead gorgeous, she was so easy to talk to, easy to just be with. She flirted like a pro, and had me regretting my rule of no sex. We ended the night with a kiss before she left in an Uber. I couldn't wait until Friday when I'd see her again, this time at her apartment. I brought a bottle of Fireball whiskey, her favorite, and some bearskin condoms, my favorite. Her apartment was on the 8th floor. The elevator was out of order, so I was stuck taking the stairs. The apartment building itself was not too bad, but it had a strange smell that permeated the entire place. I hoped her apartment didn't smell like that. It was a scent that made me sick the longer I smelled it. I knocked on her door and prayed my clothes didn't pick up the odor of the place. It took her a few minutes to come to the door, even though I could hear her in there moving around. I called out to her, asking if she was all right. I could hear a faint murmuring. as if she were talking to someone. On the phone I guessed. I called her name loudly and knocked again, and heard a loud sort of scraping sound coming from inside. I started to worry, thinking she was hurt or in danger or something. I pressed my ear to her door and listened. The second my ear touched the wood, something crashed into the door, causing me to jump back from it. I even screamed, something I'm not proud of. A half a second later the door opened, and Heidi was smiling back at me, wearing just a big white t-shirt. Her hair was a mess, like she'd just gotten up, and for a moment I thought she was sick. I was about to ask if she wanted to reschedule, but she jumped into my arms and pulled me into a tight hug. She smelled funny, like something damp and old, but not as awful as the smell in the building. I thought I could at least tolerate it for a few hours. She grabbed me by the hand and pulled me into her apartment, leading me to the sofa. It didn't smell inside, but that was possibly due to the dozens of candles she had lit all over the apartment. I guess she was trying to cover up the stink of the building, and didn't want to bring it up in case it embarrassed her. She pushed me onto the sofa, a bit harder than I'm into, but I went along with it. I asked if she was okay, but she just smiled and licked her lips in an attempt at being sexy, but totally missed the mark. She stood in front of me, swaying to music only she could hear, her eyes trained on me unblinking. I was watching her move, trying like hell to enjoy it, but it just felt weird to me. Something about her felt off. "You're hot, I'm hot. Sexy sex," she said, her voice much deeper than it had been previously. "Yeah," I said stupidly. This shit was weird, what can I say? "Eat me," she moaned, roughly lifting her shirt. I might have gone through with it if her belly hadn't looked like she was 9 months pregnant. It's not like I have anything against pregnant women, but she wasn't pregnant when I'd last seen her the week before. And it looked painful, hard and swollen, and bulging in some places. It was an immediate turn-off. "You look like you're not feeling well. If you want to call it a night and do this another time, I'm cool with it," I said, trying not to sound rude. She made a sound, a cross between a burp and cough, and quickly squatted and threw up on the floor, a dark black or red liquid that smelled just like shit in the building. At that point I was pretty much done, and sure she was either high or very ill. I jumped to my feet and started asking if she needed me to do something. Call someone, anything. She looked up at me grinning, her pupils almost as large as her eyes, and growled. "Look, I don't know if you're on something or not, but sex isn't going to happen tonight," I said. She jumped to her feet, so fast I dropped my fucking keys I'd been subconsciously holding in my fist for protection. I went to pick them up, ready to bolt the hell out of there, but she scooped them up before I could even bend down. "Give me my keys. I want to leave," I said sternly, holding out my hand. She laughed, deep and throaty, and held up my house key, staring at it like it was something she'd never seen before. "Heidi, I'm serious. Give me the damn keys," I said, no longer caring how rude I sounded. I was on the verge of calling the police when she did something I'll never forget. I'll never get this image out of my mind as long as I live. Heidi stood with her legs spread wide and dangled the keys playfully in front of me, well out of reach. She winked at me, and with her other hand lifted her shirt to reveal her bulging belly underneath, and with the other hand, she thrust my house key hard up inside her. I nearly fucking fainted, especially when the blood began to trickle down her thighs onto her beige carpet. "Fuck! Are you fucking crazy?" I screamed. She laughed again, continuing that same horrific thrusting motion. For a split second, even though she was smiling, I could see her eyes full of fear and pain, silently pleading with me for help. I backed up to the door, my hand fumbling to open it. I didn't want to take my eyes off her, not for a second. "Want to see?" She giggled, and she opened her mouth so wide I thought her jaw would snap. I stared at her in frozen horror, watching as something creeped up her throat, resting on her tongue. 2 pale fingers wiggled in the back of her mouth, the nails painted a pastel blue. I screamed, trying to twist the lock on the door. Heidi snapped her mouth shut and smiled. She lunged for me, grabbing my arms and pushing them against the door as she brought her head closer to mine. I screamed for help and tried pushing her off, but she was stronger than I was. I thought I would die in that smelly-ass apartment, but I was able to wrestle out of her grasp and somehow managed to get my keys from her. I pulled the door open and booked it down the hall. I looked back only once, to see Heidi standing in the doorway, her face twisted in an expression of rage. I ran down the steps, falling more than once. I got to my car and got the hell out of there. I called the police, but I didn't know exactly what to say. I just said a girl was harming herself. I didn't hear back from them or Heidi. I stopped using apps to meet women, although it's not a sure thing that I won't run into something like that again. I drove past her apartment last night, just out of curiosity. The building is no longer being used, and has been boarded up for some contamination. But something from the windows was watching me as I drove by, smiling down at me from the 8th floor. I'm terrified now and thinking of moving, because I never did find my fucking house key. I answered some questions about details on part 1, which was the story you just read, which I'll repeat here to clear some stuff up. Part 1 happened in 2015, when I was a junior in high school, and I'm a junior in college now. I was 15 during this first homecoming debacle, because I'm young for my grade. Everyone else involved was 16 or 17 at the time. My parents, after all this played out, had very different reactions. My mother apologized for not believing me in the first place, and pressuring me to lower my standards. My relationship with her has become a success story in the past 4 years, and this experience jump-started its evolution. On the other hand, my father has rewritten the narrative entirely, and insists he never once advocated I go to homecoming with my date. He says he was always wary of this kid, and he also did never ask if I was gay. I'm not. I'm bi actually, but I didn't realize it until senior year of high school. I didn't go to the guidance counselor, yet, because she was known to be bad at her job, as you'll see in this continuation. She victim blamed a lot, and she would usually bring up religion to solve students' problems, regardless of our school being public and non-religious. She was fired after I graduated in 2017. My high school and home district in general was an administrative nightmare. I've heard from younger friends that, after a massive staff turnover, things are starting to look up, but none of it improved during my time there. My story was perfectly in character for the level of ignorance my school expressed towards unhealthy activity. My date didn't, and doesn't, use social media, at least not to my knowledge. I found an abandoned Twitter account that looked like it might belong to him, but it was last active in 2016. I have no contact with him at all anymore, which I guess is a happy ending. A few people have implied I'm making all of this up. They're not the first, and they probably won't be the last, to say so. Even I know this shit's wild, and that's why I didn't say a word about it for years. I don't feel the need to prove my honesty to random strangers on the internet. If there's anything I learned from this nightmare, it's that people will only believe what they want to believe. The truth is that I had a weird as all hell experience, and it's affected my life in a lot of ways. Believe it or don't, I still have to deal with its repercussions on a daily basis. This post is less of an update, since all of this happened years ago, than it is a continuation. Long story short, my ex-date didn't get the message after homecoming junior year, and he ended up pulling some seriously weird shit even until after we graduated. None of it was as epic as junior homecoming, but it definitely cast a shadow over the latter half of my high school experience. From here on out, due to his activity for the next 2 years, I'll be referring to him as my stalker. For the months after homecoming, things started to settle down again. I didn't have any classes with my stalker, and the only person I still had to deal with was the junior cheer captain. She would go out of her way to be nice to me, inviting me to parties and buying me coffee and giving me rides to games, basically bribing me to keep quiet about what a manipulative person she was. My stalker reappeared on Valentine's Day, 2016. I was still a junior, but I had almost forgotten that homecoming even happened when, halfway through my day, he cornered me in the hallway and gave me a rose out of his teeth. I hoped that would be the end of it, but I underestimated my classmates' appetite for drama. During 7th period theater, we were in the library computer lab. After the rose thing, my crush from fall semester, who had since come out as gay, warned us that my stalker was carrying around a present for me in his backpack. I thanked him for the heads up and told my best friend, Gay Revolution Lesbian. She and I were sitting together on the inside of a row when the bell rang. We stood up to leave, but the girl on the other side of me turned to face us, blocking us off from the exit. She was a close friend of the junior cheer captain's. She asked me what I was doing after school, and I knew that she must be trying to herd me towards my stalker, so I could collect my presents. I leveled with her and said I knew my stalker was waiting for me somewhere, and I told her straight up that I wasn't going to play nice with him anymore. She turned on the same old guilt trip as everyone else, telling me how much he cared about me and how hard he worked on these presents, but I refused to go. I knew I needed to get out of the school as soon as possible, before she just told my stalker to come meet me at the library instead of the theater hall. To get her out of my way, I said I'd go meet him after I went to the bathroom, and she moved out of the walkway. my best friend, and I hid out in the bathroom farthest from the theater hall. I knew he wouldn't leave until he'd delivered his gifts, and we had rehearsal that day, so I knew I'd have to go down there sooner or later. My best friend suggested she go down and retrieve the presents for me, so he'd leave before I had to go to rehearsal. 2 more of my friends happened upon our bathroom crisis, and they decided to link up with my best friend on her mission. I waited in the bathroom while they went to intercept the gifts. 20 minutes later, they returned. Among the gifts were 3 boxes of my favorite candy, which I didn't really like anymore, thanks to this whole mess, an expensive Doctor Who jewelry box, and a full bouquet of roses again. They told me, laughing uncomfortably, that there had been a whole group of people waiting for me to walk into the theater hall. My stalker wasn't too happy to hand over the presents, but my best friend made it clear I wouldn't be coming to get them, so he could hand them over to my friends or never deliver them at all. After about 10 minutes, the group waiting for me dissipated, and my stalker gave away the gifts. I was so creeped out that I didn't keep any of them, not even the jewelry box, which was TARDIS-shaped and actually kind of cool. For my birthday a few weeks later, I got out of school after 4th period and went to a theme park with my cousin. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving or where I was going. My best friend told me my stalker had waited outside the theater hall for me with a letter and a rose in hand until the school kicked everyone out who wasn't in theater. I was assistant director and light crew for one-act play that spring. An acquaintance of mine who didn't keep up with gossip was in charge of making the program, and she mentioned how cute my boyfriend was for taking out an ad in the program for me. I was sufficiently freaked out, told her I didn't have a boyfriend, and asked to see the ad he'd paid for. It was a picture of my stalker and I from junior homecoming, along with a note that said something like, "Good luck, Saucy, I love you." I begged my friend not to put it in the program, and she didn't, seeing my obvious discomfort. She refunded him his money and made some excuse about a local business buying more ad space. He tried the same trick for the last show of the year, which I was actually in. He showed up to opening night and got kicked out for filming. The theater department has now instituted a widespread rule of checking with the person an ad is targeted at before printing it, which is more than school administration ever cared to do. During a cleanup day for theater the summer before senior year, a guy from a different school showed up to help. He had been talking to me over social media for a few weeks, and I knew I was his next target. He'd made a game out of going on a date with every girl in our department. Sure enough, he asked me out while I cleaned up the prop closet, and I agreed. He was decent looking, and he wasn't mentally unstable, even if he was a fuckboy. I also knew that, if I played my cards right, I could turn this to my advantage. He was using me, so I just made sure I got something out of it, too. We went on our date. It was okay, no weird advances or anything, and he bought me dinner. On the way home, I directed the conversation towards homecoming. He caught my drift and asked me right there, no muss, no fuss. I said yes. Senior year started. My new date was all the way over at his school on the other side of town. My stalker was in 2 of my classes, 4th period biology and 6th period English, and had the same lunch as me. I was hyper aware of him staring at me every day, but didn't want to make a big deal about it. I knew he wanted my attention, and I refused to give it to him. Instead, I went about my life as usual. I made friends with the teachers who were lunch hall monitors, so I could leave the cafeteria, effectively avoiding my stalker. I ate lunch in the theater hall with my best friend every day. I asked my biology and English teachers not to make me sit by him or work in groups with him, and they agreed, if somewhat reluctantly. They, like pretty much everyone else, thought I was a dramatic cheerleader making up stories. I was a senior, and I really didn't want to deal with the bullshit of a crazy stalker anymore. Not that I ever wanted to in the first place. Homecoming was even earlier this year than last year. In English class, my stalker sat near 2 theater girls who usually walked to 7th period theater with me, and he turned around to ask them for ideas on how to ask me to homecoming. They were in the camp of classmates who were amused by my stalker's antics, so they wanted to rile him up and watch the fireworks. They also knew about the fuckboy I was talking to, because theater kids are the worst gossips ever, and they gleefully told my stalker that I already had a date. He proceeded to attempt to bite his finger off in class, which went about as well as you might think. Obviously, he didn't succeed, but he did draw blood, and he terrified my 2 theater friends, who had incited his instability. He stared at me the whole time, and I sat on the other side of the room and ignored him. I didn't care what he did. I refused to give him my attention, and I wouldn't be intimidated by him anymore. After class, my 2 friends came up to me and told me the details of what had just happened. Together, the three of us approached the English teacher. She believed me fully this time. He was moved into a different English class by the next week. Side note, bless this teacher. She was the first adult I encountered who took action to protect me, and she continued to check in with me about the situation throughout the rest of senior year. Sixth period became nothing less than a sanctuary for me, because for once somebody believed me, and they were listening. I didn't have to worry about him after fourth period, because I skipped lunch every day. I was getting confident about my escape maneuvers. Edit. Forgot to mention the third and weirdest self-harm incident. After getting kicked out of English class, he desperately wanted my attention, so he got a pass out of his class one day and found mine. He walked to the trash can outside the door to my class, and I watched in horror and disgust as he pulled out a tooth and held his face over the trash can, spitting out blood. I know I said I wasn't giving him attention anymore, but the kid just ripped out a body part. I feel like I'm allowed to be terrified. Then my usual hall monitor was gone, and I got stuck in the cafeteria. I had been out of lunch for so long that I had forgotten my stalker was in the same one until I accidentally made eye contact with him, staring at me from across the room like some kind of grudge ghost. The second I saw him, he started speed walking across the room to my table. I ignored him, hoping he was just trying to psych me out, but it didn't work. He sat down in the seat next to mine. I was freaking out. I looked at the girl on the other side of me and begged her to get him out of here. She simply laughed at me. A year before, I would have kept quiet and dealt with my discomfort for fear of people hating me. But I was a year older and already contracting senioritis, so I stood up, grabbed my backpack, and stomped out of the lunchroom. The hall monitor stopped me, asking where I was going and if I had a pass. I said I was going to talk to the crisis counselor, and he let me go, probably because he didn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. I walked directly to the counselor's office, signed in, and found myself sitting in her office a few minutes later. I told her the whole story from the beginning. I had been to her office once before, and she'd shooed me away after saying I was being too dramatic. This time, she didn't. Instead, she spent the greater half of the hour I was there asking why I hadn't come to her when all this started. When I finally got her to address the actual problem, her first question reaffirmed my fears. She asked me, after I told her about the self-harm and threats and general creepery, what about him made me so opposed to dating him? I thought I was going to scream. I had a gut feeling that the truth wouldn't get me anywhere, and I needed action. I didn't care how I got it done, but I needed him out of my life and definitely out of my classes. So knowing full well her attachment to Jesus, I pulled the Saving Myself for Jesus card. I put all those Sundays being forced to go to church to good use, and it worked. She stopped asking me why I'd waited, why not just date him, and asked what would make me feel safer. I told her to get him out of my schedule, and she said she'd look into my options. Within a few days, I was called back to her office. She had gotten him placed in another lunch period, but biology was only offered fourth period, and both of us needed it to graduate. I still considered this a victory. I only had to see him for 50 minutes every day. She told me to come talk to her whenever I needed someone to lean on. She would make sure my teachers understood. Fun fact, junior year, my best friend was sexually assaulted by an adult man. When she left class mid-panic attack to go see this crisis counselor, she was told to pull herself together and get back to class before she missed anything important. My stalker found new methods of seeing me. My best friends didn't make the cast of Winter Musical, but I did. I didn't realize that I had been isolated until my stalker joined crew and regularly tried to intimidate me. He would drill holes in set pieces that didn't need work because I was sitting near them and he wanted to watch me flinch. He would steal the props I used and hide them in the shop, so I had to be near him to retrieve them. My new crush and I were co-dance captains, and she convinced her friend the set head to keep my stalker off stage at all times. After musical ended in spring, my new crush told me she'd heard my stalker was getting angry about me, playing hard to get. I was hanging out in the theater hall with a few crew kids, getting ready for one-act play, when one of them pointed at me shocked and went, "You're saucy?" He told me he'd seen pictures of my backyard. I was confused and weirded out, so he explained that my stalker had shown him pictures of my backyard and porch. I asked to see them, and he said he didn't have the pictures, he'd just been shown them by my stalker. I didn't really believe him, and he could tell, so he said, "You have a big bay window in your living room, a bunch of bikes on your back porch, and a big-ass rose bush." It was an accurate description. I don't know for sure how to explain that, but I've theorized that my stalker had, at some point, been in my backyard before we adopted our purebred Doberman. The Doga had freaked out in the middle of the night a few times, but we brushed it off. Now, I wasn't so sure. My bedroom was in the front of the house, so I tried to reassure myself by thinking he hadn't seen me changing or anything super scary, but it didn't really help. My best friend was disowned by her mother and stepdad, and within a weekend she was shipped off to live with her biological father. I told myself I could survive the next 4 months and graduate, and then I'd never see my stalker again. I persuaded my parents, as prom and graduation approached, that I only wanted one present, my best friend. They paid for her plane ticket both ways and flew her home to be my date to prom. I kept her a secret so I could surprise our other friends when she showed up at prom to dance with us. My stalker only briefly entertained the thought of asking me to prom, which I later discovered was the now senior cheer captain's doing. I guess she'd finally started to realize the full effect of her actions, because she'd told him he needed to leave me alone. I don't know what else she said, but he went eerily silent in the weeks leading up to prom. He still came to the last play of the year, but he didn't film me this time. He waited for me outside the auditorium afterwards, but I was with other people on our way to cast dinner, and he didn't try anything. At prom, my friends were elated when they saw my best friend had returned. We danced and talked shit and had a great time together. It was honestly one of the best moments of my life when they walked in and saw her. Of course, my stalker tried one last time to change my mind. My friends and I were sitting at one of the tables together, laughing and catching up, and I saw my best friend's expression turn into a glare when someone walked up behind me. I turned around to see my stalker, waiting behind my chair. I stood up, I was taller than him in my heels, and said, as calmly as possible, that he wasn't welcome here. I was also 17 and pissed off and feeling unstoppable, so I tacked on, "If you ever speak to me again, I'll rip your dick off." It was the last thing I ever said to him. My best friend flew away again, we all graduated, and everyone went our separate ways for college. I saw my stalker again at the first homecoming after I graduated high school, but he didn't talk to me. He just stared at me the whole game. Later, he showed up to my sister's fall play at our alma mater, and he asked a cast member where she was and if I was there. Lucky me, the cast member was one of my littles, and he told my stalker he needed to leave immediately. I guess this story has a happy ending. I got away in one piece, with no foreseeable appearance of my stalker in my future. To my dad, I do in fact like boys. I just like girls too. But for the sake of the subreddit and my happiness, homecoming date from hell, worst set crew member ever, and bringer of teeth roses and junior mints, let's not meet again.